So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to welcome you all to the start of our fall series for We Are Moving the Needle's Fix the Mix career workshops. For those of you who don't know me or haven't met me yet, I'm Sky Landgraf. I'm our Director of Partnerships and Programs here at We Are Moving the Needle. Um, and as you all know, as we get started here, I just want to share that community sits at the heart of all that We Are Moving the Needle does. And these workshops are really designed to connect students, our early career professionals who are in the room, and leaders from across the music industry for mentorship, career development. This is really our opportunity to bring our community together, give back, and remind everyone that you're not alone on this journey. These sessions are also provide or designed to provide some tangible grounding to some of the practical questions you're facing. So today we're going to be discussing some critical pieces around like the business side of being a freelance creator and how you work with a manager, negotiating rates, expanding your network, all of these questions that we get quite a bit from folks in our network as you're getting started or figuring out how to elevate your career. So thank you to all of you who are with us today. Thank you for submitting your questions with your RSVPs. If you did submit a question, please know we've tried to incorporate those into the moderated discussion portion of today's talk. And then we will have time for live Q&A as well. So please don't hesitate to pop questions in the chat as we go. I'll be keeping track of that and we'll be kind of have the opportunity to open up into more live Q&A portions at the end. So without further ado, I'm super excited to introduce our speakers today, Lysee Webb and Phil Weinrobe. They're to my left and right. In Zoom, I never know, so I'm going to keep gesturing this way, but they might be different for all of you. Lysee is a We Are Moving the Needle soundboard member and also the founder of Pelt Management, which represents Grammy Award-winning producers, engineers, creative directors, and recording studios. Some of the esteemed names on her roster include Sean Everett, who's worked with Beyonce, Casey Musgraves, Brittany Howard, SZA, Jonathan Lowe, who's worked with Taylor Swift, Gracie Abrams, The National, Waxahachie, Jason Agle, who's worked with Prince and Lauryn Hill, Leon Michaels, Remy Wolf, Clairo, Nora Jones, and of course, Phil, who is with us today. Phil is a Grammy-nominated producer, mixer, and recording engineer based in New York, in the Catskills, as he has shared. He is the owner of Sugar Mountain Studio, where he specializes in an organic production style, which centers raw and immediate performances. He's worked with a variety of acclaimed artists, including Adrianne Lenker of Big Thief, singer-songwriter Billie Marten, and Lonnie Holly. And then in addition to his work behind the board, he's also an educator and he leads workshops with partners like School of Song. I think he has one coming up. So if you really enjoy your time with Phil today, I'll put a plug in to go check out School of Song as well. And that is who we have with us. So as we get started, I'd like to kick us off with some discussion around like building the creator manager relationship and how you began working together. So Phil, I think let's start from your perspective. How did you know it was the right time to find a manager and what did you look for when you were looking for a management partner? I don't know if Lysee was the first manager that you worked with. Did you have to go through a trial and error period, etc.?
Yeah. So yeah, how did I know it was the right time? I think le- the really good question. You kind of have to like work your way to a point where it's not working for you to do it anymore. So like my business got to a point where it was like, man, if I like the amount of time I'm spending on admin, business development, all that stuff is just it's like having a negative impact on my work. And once I kind of realized that, I realized I needed to bring in a partner to help. And so yeah, so I emailed some musician managers, some artist managers, and got like lists of producer managers that they liked that they had worked with. I went online, I researched like all my other producer friends and like who's their manager. Um, and I talked to a few. I talked to like a small handful, maybe three or four, not that many. Quickly focused on Lysee because she's the best. Uh, and Lysee was like, okay, yeah, maybe we could work together. Call me in like 6 months. She was like, when Lysee like was like, okay, you have this and this and this coming up. When all those actually happen and actually are done, which I think was like both like actually true. Like it would be more useful if those things were done. And two, like, let me see you finish those things you said you're gonna finish. Uh, and then I finished them and I was like, okay, Lisa, these things are done. And Lisa was like, okay, cool, let's do it. So that's kind of how that process went. It has to be from I remember someone saying once like you should make business decisions from like a place of pain. Like something should hurt and then force you to do something. And so like I think that's really true for getting a producer manager. It's like you shouldn't be like comfy and be like, oh, maybe this will be better. It should be like you should be in pain, and then that should like lead you into the manager. If you're not in pain, that means like you should still be doing it. That was my
The need needs to be there.
yeah. It needs to be there. It needs to be strong need.
Yeah. Lysee, from your side, how do you go about taking on new clients? Phil kind of alluded to your maybe let them cook a little bit, make sure they're in the right spot.
I think
Approach. Yeah.
Phil hit the nail on the head, honestly, really well. I think you need a manager when you're too busy. And oftentimes I get calls when people that are being led by people saying they're not busy enough. And as a prospective manager, I never want to hear someone say, I'm just looking for more work. I really need more work. I don't have enough work. Like that is not the right lead. And I can pretty much end the call right there. But Phil was a great example of just someone being like, I'm too busy. I can't keep all of this straight. He's getting boggled down by the admin side. I think the how boggled down he's being by the admin side is affecting the creative side where it's all, invoices are being delayed or he's worried about trying to talk about rate negotiations while he's in session with an artist. Like all those things start to get messy. I think that's the right time to get a manager. The biggest thing I like to say to my clients when I first start working with them is that I want to make you more money after my commission comes out of it. And even going back to what I was saying with someone starting a call but being like, I need more work. I'm not busy enough. I want more work. Oftentimes that can go hand in hand too, sometimes with rates being too low. And I think that's a problem where like I have to remind them, like if you're only billing a couple $100 a day, you're going to make less after my commission comes out. I get paid from commission. So if you're already not happy with what you're making, you're going to get paid, you're going to get less. So I think it's finding someone where you can build with them a little bit and you're talking to them and you're asking the right questions of how much are you billing? How long have you been billing that? What do you have coming up over the next 6 months? And getting a really good feel for how they're currently running their business and then how I feel I can wedge myself in to like enhance it.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's an important piece. Like to Phil's point, like the pain point should be not like I need work necessarily or I'm struggling, but actually like I've got so much going on. I need help managing everything that's happening. And the
Exactly.
quite literal, like that's what a manager is managing.
Exactly.
Um, your relationship is, I think, reflects some similarities to what we might be used to in an artist-manager relationship, but it is also quite different, the dynamic between a producer and their manager. And so, what do you see as some of those key distinctions, Lysee, particularly from, your side of the table, like when you're working with Phil in a quite different way than, having to like be on tour with him or be even in the studio with him? Like, how
Right.
does that look on your side?
I think the simplest way to say it is that producer management is probably more adjacent to like being an agent than it is a manager in a lot of ways. The artist managers I know are dedicating a lot of one-on-one time to their artists to the point where they could be spending 90% of their time just talking directly to their artist, and any outward facing calls they're making are to that artist's label, publicist, lawyer, agent, marketing director, this whole team of people, right? It's a very insular network. On the contrary, producer management is the total opposite. Like I have loyalty to no one. I talk to everyone. I make new contacts every day. People blindly email me every day. I blindly reach out to new people every day. It's a deeply, deeply expansive network of artist managers, label A&Rs, that just it's ever growing. And that's a huge difference from an artist manager. And then as you pointed out too, like artist management, the biggest fires and time consumption points are really touring, marketing, publicity, and I don't deal with any of those things. And if I do, it's in a very, very minimal niche place.
This is kind of also a great segue then into like that A&R component of things and like how you are working together to identify new projects for Phil and build the business that is Phil, if you will. So how does that look like for both of you? Who spearheads outreach? Like how do you follow leads? Where are those leads even coming from? You know, how do you find folks?
I think that's a process where we're really working together. Phil's at a point in his career where he's done some remarkable records, and we're in a really great position where there's a lot of reactive calls that are coming in for him of people wanting to work with. So part of it is just vetting what's coming in, which can take time in and of itself of just having an understanding of, is this music good? Is the timeline of this artist coincide with your availability? Does the budget work? Like, where are they based? Like, all of those questions. Again, going back to the admin side of kind of vetting it, getting some answers before I'm even bringing it to Phil. I mean, that's the reactive side of it. The other side of it is just, me talking to my network, having a general understanding of who's making new music. I think it's utilizing the records that Phil has done and seeing what can branch around those and what lives around those, where it could be like, hey, do you want to work with the guy that made this record? And then I think a big part of it too is just what Phil likes, that's not to be overlooked, like what gets his attention, what he enjoys doing. I think the A&R that he's doing himself is just as important, if not more important than everything I just said. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, I could do a lot more of that set of that last thing. I'm I have on my calendar all the time like circled like do like make lists of artists and it like just isn't happening because I'm too busy. But that is something I really am excited about. That's actually something I'm really excited about for the future. Is like giving Lysee a list of like 30 artists and being like, I love these people. Can you like make the embarrassing emails and phone calls to their team? And that's gonna be so cool when I finally do that. But yeah, it's a lot of reactive stuff and it's a lot of vetting, a lot of yeah, figuring out like what we like, and within that there's a lot of yeah, what we like stuff. So yeah, biz dev is hard. I always think like the like most important thing though, even outside of like I want to make a list and Lysee having her network, which is honestly huge. Huge both in size but huge in importance also is just like being in like a community. So I think like the A&R work that I do is actually just like being in community and like going to the dinner and going to the party and going to the show and like, oh yeah, at the show is like this famous artist or this cool artist I want to work with or this young artist who hasn't put anything out, but I'm like chatting with them. Like those are where like a lot of that connection gets made. And then they might go back, be like, oh, what else has that guy done? Oh, I love that guy. Hit up their manager. All of a sudden there's a thing. So like I think there's like nothing more powerful at really every stage of a career than like like yeah, embedding yourself in like as many scenes and as many communities as you can as like a real participant, as like a
I think
peer.
that's a really great point too, because I think it highlights how, for folks who are starting out, like those are the pieces that are helpful to think about now. And I think it's also helpful, even going back to the question of like, you don't need a manager when you're struggling to find work. You need a manager to manage the work that you're bringing in. That kind of self directed discovery is always going to be a piece of the puzzle that no one else is going to be able to like be the deus ex machina for you on, right? Like you're always going to have to be putting in that work. So developing those networks, those communities, those skill sets, everything that you're doing now at the first phases of your career are things that are going to actually feed into you and your career growth throughout the entire time and is like worthwhile and valuable to be doing for those very reasons. You're never going to stop doing them.
Yeah, one of the things that Phil said too is going back to this idea of doing A&R for yourself. And it's something that I ask all my clients to, and just sometimes even producers and engineers I talk to that I don't work with, but I think it's an important A&R exercise that I would encourage every producer and engineer that's on this call that's looking for more work. It's a really important exercise to take on, and it's just putting a list together of people that you want to work with. And I like to set it up in tiers where it's like the first tier can be this idea of misconnection. So for someone like Phil, maybe he's making a record with Big Thief and they've brought in so and so as a guest vocalist, and this guest vocalist and him talked about working together really, really casually. And then that vocalist left and they never brought it up again. Where it's like there's a misconnection where like something could happen there, but it's going to require someone to kind of create that B2B of like all the things like maybe I was in the studio with someone and I briefly said hello to this, or I did a record with this band and this person is friends with that band, where that's like tier one. Tier two is like obvious points of connection where it's just like, oh, I did this record and this other artist has publicly said that this artist is their biggest source of inspiration and they're their biggest fan. So it's like that seems like an obvious point of connection of like, oh, we should be reaching out to them. That would be a great one. And then the last tier is just like your big shot list of like who's on it. Is it Radiohead? Is it Dolly Parton? Is it Paul Simon? Like no big or too small, just like your dream, drop everything. I would do this no matter what list. And I feel like that's a really important creative exercise to look at. And as a manager, and even as if you don't have a manager, just to look at it yourself, to be able to get this idea of like, oh, okay, this kind of paints a picture for me of what I'm looking for, what I want to be working on. Because from that list, I'm like, okay, am I going to call up Tom York and book you Tom York? I'm like, no, but I can look at that and I can say, okay, this creates a vibe. He wants to work in this space, you know? Because I think
Mm.
going back to what Phil said too, like some of the biggest records that I've been a part of, whether it's Sean and Miley Cyrus, Leon and Clairo, Phil and Adrian, I didn't get any of those records for any of those people. Let me say it. I did not get any of those. However, you can bet two things. One, that I got them all very good deals on those records. And two, that I'm able to use those records to get all of them more work and even better deals.
Mm. Mm. I love that. Let's talk about the money. Let's go into the money question, shall we? I think it'd be helpful to kind of kick us off with a little bit of a demystification moment for folks and like walk through just a little bit of the basics when we're talking about negotiating contracts at your level and like even the distinction between like the contracts piece and the, personal rate negotiation. And then you've also got, how you're working, in particular, this is on your side, Lysee, with like artist managers and A&R and other label folks all involved. Like, just what are some of the basics that you think people should know to kind of demystify how that process works from the start?
I would say two things. One is throw the term indie out of your vocabulary. Like never lean into this idea of indie rate ever again. Remove it from your vocabulary and encourage those around you to stop saying it as well. I think anytime someone's saying that to you, there's just this connotation that they want to pay you less. And I hate that. I think the way that you replace that word is by talking about how scalable you are and you're amenable and you can be scalable. But you don't need to say indie versus this. That's stupid, right? Number one. Number two, I think people are always, especially when they're just getting started, they have this idea where it's like, I need a contract, I need a contract, I need a contract, I need a lawyer, I need a contract. You don't always need a contract. You don't always need this like super long form legal jargon contract signed by both parties, every little fine print minutia ironed out. Like if you're just making a record with an unsigned artist that's local to you, and mostly you just want to make sure that you guys are in agreement on terms and that you're going to get paid, all you need is to have everything kind of outlined, bulleted in an email where you're like, hey, I just want to clarify these terms. Here they are, bullet. You don't need to be a lawyer to write that. And then just have a response back from them that said, yep, I'm on the same page. And you can say, great, I'm going to bill you 50%. I think those are two important things to get started, especially if you're operating without a manager. The next one I'll say is just like that classic dance of what's your rate, what's your budget, what's your rate, what's your budget. I personally love if I'm able to get someone to draw first. It happened last night where my client was prepared to take something on at X price, and I was able to get somebody else to draw first and was able to get double the amount that they wanted just because I was able to like kind of poke the info out. Um, but it's okay to ask first, but also be prepared to answer too, right? I think it's important to know your base value of what you're trying to make from it, what your threshold is, how bad you want to take it on. Um, Another big thing too is be wary of someone throwing out a number to you that feels big and just immediately saying yes to it. I think if someone's like, hey, I want to make a record with you, I've got 20K, and you're like, shit, 20K, that's not that bad. Like, cool, yeah, let's do it. Pause. Don't say yes yet. Let's say, okay, let me break that down a little bit and have a better understanding of what that means and what that needs to cover. And that's often where I will kick it over to Phil, where I would call him and say, Phil, these guys have 20K. What can you do for 20K? And I think Phil's really good at opening up his Google Doc there and crunching those numbers where he can say, okay, 20K, I can't make a record in that. Let's try and make an EP, or I can make a record with that if they've got the music in a good spot and we can only work for this many days. Like you have to see what that number is. It including musicians? Is that including mixing? Does that include you producing and engineering? What about mastering? Like, do you have to pay for a studio within that? Are they paying for meals over the course of those days? Those are all questions you have to ask yourself before you blindly agree to like, yeah, let's do it for 20K. Because oftentimes if someone's saying I've got 20K, usually sometimes that means you can get to like 24 to 26, which for a budget like that, that's kind of significant. So what
Yeah,
do you
that's like
think?
an extra quarter. Yeah. So, what's from your perspective? I'm curious how, like, this in particular, Lysee mentioned, like, you have a very good, keen sense of how to map out for yourself how long something's going to take, and what it might require from your hours, from like the scope of the project that's available. How did you get good at that?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that like, yeah, well, I will say that like being a producer, engineer is running a small business for sure. And like, if you just have to have small business owner skills. So like, you got to be like proficient a little bit in like some kind of business administration, understanding your costs, understanding your income, making sure that all that's going to like work out. Um, so I just have been like practicing that for a long time. And I also love spreadsheets a lot. In fact, I feel like my current job doesn't have enough spreadsheets in it, so I try to like figure out how to make more spreadsheets. But I just love crunching the numbers and I love understanding like where the like budget and my needs can meet and like figuring out how that like turns into art. That is creative, I think, and I see that as a creative process. Um, and yeah, like just like Lisi said, like it's it's a lot about like being able to break it down, being able to understand like the big numbers really are like they're never hard numbers, they're never like they always can move and you just need to know like what each little thing really is going to be and learning and then making a system to account for all of those. Like I used to always forget lunch. I would just forget. For years I would be like, "Oh, wait, all of a sudden it's like the first day of the session, we have everything mapped out, and there's 8 people in the room, and everyone needs to eat a burrito. And like that's expensive. And like you can't forget that. So now it's just in my spreadsheet. I can't forget it. It's like a line item. So like having that all like sorted is so crucial. And when you're starting out, I think it's also really important in the negotiation phase, like with Lisi now, Lisi does that, and like, I don't even know what happened. It's a black box. But for starting out, I think it's really good to have like I liked having a rate that I knew when I was starting out because at the low number zone, I don't know, there's not really that much negotiation. Like you got to just like stick to it. And I think that also I think like having a rate, being able to stick to it when you're starting out and being cool talking about it is like a trust building thing with the community of artists you're working with. So I would say, yeah, my rate is $400 a day, $300 a day, whatever it was. Let's say it was $400 a day. And like, that's it. I don't work less than that. I also didn't work more than that. I just like, for a long time, I just like cranked out at 400 and I was very open about it. And that made people feel um, like, oh, Phil's able to talk about this money, that's vulnerable. That makes them feel like they can be vulnerable in the creative part. So, like, the money part and the creative part go together. You build creative trust through having open financial conversations with people at the appropriate times, the appropriate time being early in the process, never late. You never want to be like, in the session, day one went really well. So, how much are we getting paid for this thing? That's got to be worked out way ahead of time. So, yeah, I really think it's like getting that skill together and like doing reps on it. So like just doing it again and again, talking about the money, talk about the money, talk about the money, that is going to actually build up your career because people will trust you. You'll get busier, then you get to hire a Lysee, and then you never have to talk about it again, except a Lysee.
Yeah. I'm curious, we get questions often from folks who are, they're starting out, they're working with their friends and peers, and they've set a rate that feels reasonable for that group, and then they get to a point where they can start feeling like they can and should raise their rates, and not, but they're uncertain how to navigate that conversation. And at the start of this,
Uh,
Lysee, you brought up the really great point of like scrub the idea of your indie rate from your, like, don't refer to it as that. But there is that real reality, to fill your point also too, around like you're trying to build trust in the room, you're trying to like do those pieces. How do you go ahead and how did you like navigate that moment when you needed to level up from, say, your this is my $400 a day to what do I do next?
I had a big process for that because I did that like multiple times, but then once Lisi comes in now, there's no more rates. It's like different. But when you're starting out, the way I did it was I had a rate, and then I would just, whenever I felt, I don't even know how I figured it out, but like I would just feel like my rate's going up now. And what I would do is I would um just tell all the new people this is my rate. I wouldn't like announce Phil's rate goes up. That's like never, it's like there is no published rate. And then if when my old client who I worked, let's say I went from 400 to 500. Okay, let's say the 400 guy came back and was like, "Hey, let's make another record." I'm like, at that point I would usually say to them, "Hey, just so you know, my rate's now 500. I'm going to do this project for you at the 400, and the next project is going to be at the new rate." So I kind of like inched everybody forwards. New business comes in at the new rate, old business works their way up. Again, though, this is, I think, pretty particular to like your early stage career. When you get into like bigger artists and like later stage, I think it might be a little different. I'm going to guess Lisi has a much different system now with like other people. I think when an artist comes back for a second round with me now with Lisi, I'm sure she's not like, okay, well, she's not
He's not
talking.
billing $400 a day, I'll tell you
Yeah.
that.
But that's how I did it, and I felt it worked actually quite well. No one got angry. I didn't have to like preemptively tell, like make an announcement, and I just like did it, and it was fine. And that's how it went for years until I got a manager.
There's such a simple answer to this question, and I'll give you the complicated one too. But the simple answer to this question is you lead into your rate by saying, I'm currently billing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Mm.
Because I'm currently billing this, and in 6 months, maybe you're currently billing more than that, you
You
know?
always say currently, which has the
Yeah,
implication of temporary.
I'm currently
I
billing
love
this.
that. Lisi's so good at her job.
But the other thing it comes the other things that it comes down to too is the threshold. And this is why I like not immediately agreeing to something, like doing the pre-pro yourself as a project comes in, asking all the questions you ask before you just immediately just say, yeah, let's do it. Like you have to ask the questions to really understand. And the first one is how badly do you want to do it? Like listen to the music, talk to the artist. Like this comes up a lot with mixing, right? I'll encourage my mixers to do a chat with the artist first because I'm like, get a feel for how this process is going to go. Like, do you feel like we're going to be able to knock this out 1, 2 rounds of revisions, or are we going to be getting into like 6, 7, 8, 9? Like, this is going to be a long, tedious process. And these are questions you have to ask yourself when you're talking about money because that's the difference, especially in mixing when you're billing per track. That's the difference of why you wouldn't be quoting a blanket rate for every single thing. Maybe it wavers a little bit. If you're an engineer, if you're a producer, you are going to be billing something differently if you're going and billing in a female solo acoustic singer songwriter project versus maybe you're going in and filming this massive band with a giant orchestra attached to it. Like you would quote differently for that, you know? So I think you need to be keeping those things in mind as you're talking about money. And again, that goes back to what I was saying too about flat budgets, about making sure that when you get that flat number, that you're putting the spreadsheet together to see, okay, if I'm working on a 20K, this is going to include 10 days of work. And this will include, again, are you mixing? This will include this many tracks mixing. This will include, am I bringing an engineer in? Like, see what it includes so that you can break it down. But really, just again, your threshold. Maybe it's a project where you're like, this music is so good. I have a really gut feeling. I know this is going to be massive. I know this is going to be big. And you're just like, I've had a client say to me before, Lysee, I would mix this record for a sandwich, you know?
I love that. We're gonna start getting ready to transition into our Q&A piece. But before we do, we also have a special guest on the call, and I'd like to give a moment to give a shout out to our founder, Emily Lazar, who's here. And I know she wanted to come say
Emily.
hello.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to pop in. I am also busy working, and I wish I could be
Sure.
here for all of this because I just want to point out, and I'm sure Phil would agree with this, that there is no moment at which the money conversation is not relevant and that these things don't come up, whether you're speaking to your manager about it or you're speaking directly to the client. And the only thing I would add in here that could be helpful if you are not at the level of having a manager yet is a trusted confidant friend can actually take some calls for you and play the part if you coach them. And then other than that, you can also, and this is pretty sneaky and probably pretty terrible, but as I have found out in my life in talking with other women who are really successful in their fields, and I can tell you flat out that I had this. There's a fake email address, a fake human, and by the way, a male human that works for fake male human that worked for me when I was first starting out got very different responses from people than a fake female person in an email address, which is fascinating in and of itself. But it's an interesting thing to be able to negotiate yourself with people without having to put yourself in that conversation, because it is horrible when you would mix the record for a sandwich and you get nervous because somebody responds a certain way or pulls back. When you have the ability to have, a Lysee between you or a fake email address between you, your ability to really stand up for yourself is very different than when somebody threatens to take it away. So yeah, so I'm a very big fan of the fake email address. The other really cool thing about the fake email address is that when you're speaking with people, interestingly enough, you can also psychologically feel out some of the people you're working with, and see if they're good people, because they speak to assistants. If they still don't speak to an assistant in a nice way or a manager in a nice way, they're not a good person. And so going into it, kind of what kind of human you're dealing with, which is very helpful, I think. So I just wanted to throw that out for those of you who are in the room who are like, oh, because hearing Lysee speak, it's like, oh, that's exactly what I need. I need a Lysee in my life. And yes, you do, but it takes time to get there. And as you're having your, $1, $2, $3, $400 days, as you're building up to that point, you can have a pretend Lysee maybe on your side.
I suggest that all the time, Emily. It's such a good idea.
Yeah.
Such a good idea. And I recommend it all the time.
I just want to say, you guys take serious notes. Every word that comes out of that mouth is gold. And Phil, it's great to see you. And you guys have an amazing time today. This is like so special. We're so grateful to both of you for giving your time to this group of amazing people and that are in this room. And you two are amazing. And that's like makes this whole thing very worth it to me personally that this is happening. So yay to everyone here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And see you all on the flip side. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye, Emily.
Thank you, Emily. I love that we can all start with our Todd email addresses.
Everyone should have Todd. That should be like the.
I don't know why Todd was the first generic male name I thought of, but there we go.
He's authoritative.
Well, or Steve, that's a great other suggestion. I love that. We're gonna get ready to start having opportunity for Q&A. So please feel free to start putting your questions in the chat. And we have a reasonably sized group here, so I will try to call on people if I can. You can also put it in the chat for me, and that'll help me queue to where you are. As folks are starting to put their questions in, I do wonder, when you're going back to the broader contract piece, do you have like what are some of the most important things that you definitely include in every contract that you would like always recommend folks be thinking of?
I think what we talked about in terms of the breakdown of the flat fee is a great one
Mm,
to start of really, if you can't just be saying, okay, cool, I'll do it for 20,000. I'm going to build you 10,000 right now and I'll build the other 10 after. You need, especially working with flat fees like that, you need to have a clear understanding of what time that you're giving these people. It all comes down to your time, right? So if you're agreeing to that, Phil's so good at it, where he's like, this covers X studio days, this covers X tracks being mixed. Sometimes
ex
you could say
burritos.
it in covers 1 to 2 rounds of revisions, like
Yeah.
really break it down as like more minutia than you think. That way it's like you can always refer back to that. And if the band is giving you the 5th round of revision, you could say, I think we might be at a point where I could start billing you hourly for this because we had only agreed to 2 rounds, like make sure all of that stuff is really kind of crossed off. And like Phil
Mm,
said, even down to like who's paying for the meals every day in the studio.
mm. I'm curious on that note of like revisions piece. Have there been instances for you, Phil, for example, where you, even in your flat rate days, or now with Lysee, like you have best laid plans, you've made the schema, but you find yourself in the room and what you are doing is now slightly getting pushed outside of the purview of maybe what you'd originally agreed upon. That could be like from the dollars perspective, or even also like from the credits perspective too. Like you find yourself now like being maybe like pulled into mixing or something, something that may be not quite what you had started out. How have you approached that, either like starting out by yourself or like how you activate Lysee when Lysee's not in the room with you for those kinds of conversations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I got a lot to say about that. Okay, so when I was starting out, I thought it prob and I do think this worked well for me, and I would probably suggest it. I did like straight day rate on everything, including mixing, just because like I wasn't like that. It wasn't about being good at mixing, but it was like good at the business side. Flat rate work requires like you really have to have your shit together to do things on flat rate. I feel like, and I feel like I just didn't ha know all the things well enough. So I like to mix early in my career on day rates, and I would just like get what I'd got done in a day, and I communicated that very clearly. I said what I would probably be able to get done. I always was in the range, and we just did days until it was done, and they knew they paid for every day, and a lot of attended, which makes that a lot easier. In general, I kind of think a day rates equal attended usually, and unattended equals flat fees. Um, as far as like the like nuance though of like, oh wait, is this like too much now? Are we on like revisions versus whatever? The it kind of comes back to the same thing as like talking about money in the beginning, like getting all this stuff sorted. Like you have to have your scope figured out. If your scope is clear, then it's clear when you're outside of scope. And as soon as you leave the scope, you just immediately have the discussion. So for example, in mixing, personally, I have like I do unlimited revisions. It's like a religion of mine. But I don't do unlimited revisions when people are sending in new tracks. And I
Yeah.
don't do unlimited revisions when people are like, can we cut the bridge out? That's editing and that's producing. So if they want to like change the volume of the snare, I'm here for you all day long. A thousand volume changes on the snare. But as soon as you send me a new snare track, now that's a different job, and we have to renegotiate for that job. And that might be, 500 bucks. We're gonna do a round of editing, and then we'll see how it is, and then we can pick up mixing. By the way, new mix, okay? Because the old mix had the other snare. That's done. Now we're on a new mix. That's a new fee. So you have to really understand where the scope is and like what your job is. Same thing with like engineering. If you're there engineering and someone's like, can you like write me a chart for the horns? Not That's not the engineer's job. That's the producer's job or the arranger's job. So that's a different scope. So really being clear on what your scope is super, super helpful. I've always found that like the more you can be generous where it's easy, you should be like super generous and be really loud about that. And then like be like, that's gonna give you ammo to have a hard boundary when you need to. So that's kind of one of the reasons I love doing unlimited revisions because it's just so easy. And then you can be like, oh, yeah, totally. Unlimited revisions, new guitar track, that'll be $5,000. And then it makes sense because you're not like an asshole who charges for everything. So that's kind of how I think about it. And that's like kind of how I did think about versus how now I never mix on day rates and I never mix attended because now I have like my own flow down and I just want to work how I like to work.
One thing to touch on kind of within that question that's separate from mixing and maybe more so for engineers that are just getting started and are billing maybe a smaller day rate, they're kind of on the ground engineering, and it comes up a lot, is what happens when you're in the room, maybe you're in as an assistant engineer, and in the moment you're starting to feel your role shift a little bit. Maybe it doesn't feel so assistant like, and you're feeling like you're kind of leading the session as an engineer, or maybe your role is shifting and you're like, I've kind of made some creative calls here. Am I producing? Like, and even as Phil's manager, I'm not in the room with him. I'm not seeing that happen. That's on him to be able to clock those moments and be able to make those distinctions of, wait, this is more than what I signed up for. How do I handle it? And I think the best way to do it, like whether you have a manager or not, is not necessarily in the moment. It's, you don't want to creatively pause the session and be like, hey guys, hang on a second. But I think it's more so kind of going back to the admin side of it, of kind of circling back on it and be like, hey, I'm this was starting as an assistant. I think it's feeling more as a more general engineer. This is what I would typically bill as an engineer versus as an assistant engineer. I'm happy to continue to help, but it's getting in front of it. You can't wait till the end of the project to make that call. You got to raise your hand sooner rather than later. And it might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but nobody else is going to do that for you. And it happens a lot. Like I've had guys that maybe there's one story of a guy where an artist started a record in his studio where it was just his studio. It started off there. Then from there, he began to engineer it. Then he engineered for a while. And from there, the artist is like, yeah, you're definitely mixing this. You have to mix this. And they continue to work together. And by the end of it, he produced it, engineered it, and mixed it and all those things. And it kind of evolved as it went. It wasn't something that I had set up from the beginning of like, my client is doing this on this record. It just kind of evolved. But it requires you kind of staying on top of it and communicating it as you go.
One thing you just said, Lysee, about sooner than later, I just want to flag that it's not just like better sooner than later, it's like bad later.
Yeah, it's
Like
mandatory to
I
do.
know producers who like people don't work with because they waited till the end of the process and then like sprung some demand on the artist. And like that artist then gets upset and they call their friends and they say, "Can you believe I just finished the session with this person?" And then they hit me up and ask for blah blah blah. It's like, what the fuck, blah blah blah. And then they
Yeah,
tell their friend, and now that person is known as the person who like brings it up at the end, and that's no good. You
yeah,
do not be that person. In fact, my suggestion would be if you forget to do it sooner, you don't do it.
yeah.
Like do it on the next project. Like that's where you fix your process.
It
Like
happens a lot, I think, too. I saw it in like as people are in I was at Clive Davis and chatting over there and talking to a bunch of students where they were all working together. It was this community and they're all working together as an artist, as a producer, as an engineer, and they're all working together. And everyone's afraid to kind of say the B word, to talk budget, to talk money first, to the point where, as Phil pointed out, it just doesn't get mentioned. They're like, oh, let's just do it. We just want to focus on the vibe and set the vibe and we just want to make good music. Dude, we all want to make good music, but those aren't mutually exclusive. You can make good music and you can get paid. But it's like
Mm.
everyone's afraid that it's going to be a vibe killer to talk about money. But to that point, it would be a vibe killer to talk about money if you're in the studio in the middle of making music. But if you're doing your due diligence and bringing it up before you get in the studio and talking about it then, that way everyone's on the same page. And you can say, I think again, it goes back to your threshold, right? And like, here's a great way to word it. If you know you want to do a project and you know you want to do it no matter what, but you still need to get some money, but you know you want to do it, you could say, hey, I'm currently billing X, but let me know what you're working with as I'd love to make this work. And I think that really communicates like, here's what my rate is, but I really want to do this. So tell me what you're working with and we can find a way to make it work for both of us.
Mm. I love that. And I think, and putting in a plug reminder, put your questions in the chat if you've got them. Otherwise, we'll just keep gabbing like talking heads. But I do think you raise a really good point, Phil, around like the reputation piece of all of this to the point of trust building that you were saying earlier. There is an element of I think we hear a lot from folks, they're not sure how to strike the right balance between advocacy and like making sure that you are standing up for yourself and your rates and what you're worth, and figuring out how to like time that appropriately and be building trust. And I think that distinction that you are both kind of highlighting here is really key. I want to underline that because I think it's such a common one that we come up against, is that question of like, it is important. Do advocate for yourself. Never assume that you shouldn't be able to talk about the
No
money,
one
but
else is
figuring out
going
that right
to.
timing
Yeah.
is important. Yeah, no one else is going to, but that timing is also important. And sometimes you need to know how to flow that, and trust yourself and build the trust with the other person. Yeah, I think that's so
Yeah,
key.
I'll say one thing that before we jump on the questions, which is that and Emily kind of mentioned this real quickly and then quickly pivoted to the fake email, which was so cool. Why didn't no one told me to have a fake email? That would have been sick.
You have me.
Yeah, now I have Lysee, the real a real email. Okay, so what I was gonna say is like having that like okay, having that like money discussion early in the process of the record and also early in your career, having that money discussion is also made a lot better when you know what the rates are in your community, which involves talking to your friends. So like I had my little crew of engineers that I worked with in Brooklyn who were my friends, and we just always talked about the business with each other. We just like, what's your rate? How much you do that project for? How'd you talk about that? Like, get a bunch of your friends together and start a group where you literally meet once a week and just talk your business with each other. Like, demystify this shit with your friends. Because also, when you know that all your other friends are billing 500 a day to the community that you're in, then 500 a day is not a big deal. And you don't have to like be like, oh, I wonder what they're blah, blah, blah.
And
It's
you don't
like,
want to be the one guy billing 100 when everyone else is billing 500. Because I always
no,
say
very,
there's a
very
fine
bad.
line between being like the nice, friendly guy that's willing to occasionally do a favor for good music or good friends versus the cheap guy. You do not want to be known as the cheap guy. Call this person they're cheap. And that's a very thin line of the difference between those two things I said.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
really important. So making sure don't be the cheap person. How do you know you're not the cheap person? Be in discussion with your colleagues and peers. Like that's so critical. And like they can be sounding boards for negotiations. They can be just people who are feeding you info and you're feeding them info. It only makes your community stronger, more resilient. I think that's really useful.
I think
Okay.
that's helpful evergreen advice no matter what job you ever have, you ever are doing, you find yourself doing, like always know what the like going rate is for where you are at your level. That's just like so essential. Going to the chat now, from Adia, we have a question. Was there a specific situation that led you to establishing like your boundaries with your revisions, and like what has made you decide, Phil, reasonable revisions versus editing, and like drawing that distinction for yourself?
If I could
Uh,
get the first part of that question, just how I approach it, because I think that if someone's paying a fee that I think is fair for mixing, I'm more inclined to be loosey about the revision count. It's where I think we've settled on what I consider to be a discounted rate, where that's often where I'll put the clause of like, oh, you only have this budget. That's cool. We can make it work, but this includes 2 rounds of revisions. And often I lean on it. Very rarely do I ever have to actually bill hourly for additional revisions. But what it does is it holds the artist accountable to your time and it forces them to be like, okay, I'm paying them a discounted rate. I don't have endless time here. I want to make sure my notes are clear, concise. If I have other band members, if I have a label, if I have a manager that I need to talk to about these notes, I'm going to talk to them together. So we're putting our notes forward in a very streamlined way and it just holds them accountable to your time. So rarely have I ever had to be like, oh, you're on round 3, I'm starting to bill you. But more
yeah.
often than not, it just forces them to be accountable to your time, which I think is really important if you think you're working at a discounted rate.
Yeah. And I'll say like um one a thing that I've done to make like, okay, a specific situation led to establishing boundaries. What made so what are reasonable revisions? Okay, so one of the things that I did was I like basically generated, and it's a living document that keeps changing, but like I have an extremely rigid workflow for revisions. Like revisions, like I send like a multi-page document that I force people to read before I even send them a mix. So it's like the way it works is I send them a document. I say, when you have read this entire document, tell me, and then I will send you the mixes. And they read the whole document and say, oh, and
Love
it's fun. It's fun to read. So, you make it nice. And they say, I've read the whole thing. So now I know they know the system. And the system has safeguards in it. So the system says exactly how a note should be formatted, like exactly what information should or shouldn't be in a note, exactly what is like editing versus mixing versus producing. It's all in the document. So now when they start doing their round of notes, they're not even going to give me an editing note without being, hey, I'm about to give you an editing note. I know that's wrong. They're probably
You
going to
know.
actually start the conversation about this is outside of the scope. How are we going to handle this instead of putting it on me? So creating systems that like just make it safe for you to like do your thing is so important. And I learned to do that by just being in lots of situations where I would get like email from someone that was like a book. It was like prose. It was just like sentences upon sentences. How am I supposed to extract
Yeah,
actionable notes from this? So that's not allowed. You can't do that. That's in the document. That
I
explains what
love
to do.
this. This
And
is
so
so good.
you must have a system for everything, everything on a system. The system is money. Like that document makes me lots and lots of money because it saves me so much time. And that's why I do unlimited revisions is because they're so easy because my system is so rigid. And also, I think having a rigid system, anytime you can have a rigid system in a creative process, it's like good for creativity. Like we all know that. Like, you you've all experienced it. I don't need to give examples, but like restrictions, creativity, boom, explosion.
Mm.
So yeah, as far as like what's reasonable revision, any note that doesn't involve like an edit or adding a new track is reasonable. That's my general take. Like anything. There's no note that you could give me in a mix that would not be reasonable as long as it's not an edit or an additional track. Take that thing up an octave? Hell yeah, let's do it. Like make the snare sound like a, you know, car horn, great. Like I'm in. Like anything that's like, mixing, color, balance. Uh, I guess that mixing is color and balance. Color, balance, space. I'm in.
I love
I
that.
see Eva's question over here, which I think I can answer quickly, Sky, because I know we're running out of time.
Mm.
My general take on how I approach the business side of engineering, producing, or mixing. Generally, I put a day rate on engineering. I find that engineering is sometimes a little bit more in control of the artist, and I want to protect my producer or engineer's time by making sure that if the artist wants to do 10 takes of something and it's going to take more time, then they know that that's billed at a day rate and a day rate's going to cost more. Producing, I usually do a track rate, and mixing, I usually do a track rate. Oftentimes, those things can go hand in hand. A lot of times, I have people that are engineering and mixing or producing and engineering. So I bake in what I need to. Sometimes, if I'm doing a track rate for producing, I'm baking in, like, okay, my guy's done enough pre-pro on this where we have a general sense to know that we think it's going to take 2 to 3 days per track. So I'm doing that math in my head of like, how many days is it going to take to make the track? How much pre-pro is going into it? That's a little side note rant that I want to give is make sure when you're building budgets that your time begins before you step foot in the studio. If you're making an album for an artist and they're like, "Hey, I have 30 tracks. Will you help me narrow this down to an album?" Bam, your time is started before you're starting recording and engineering, and make sure you're tracking that, you know. That's called pre-pro, and that's billable time.
Oh yeah. Should we
Um,
rapid fire these guys?
you wanna do a rapid fire? You ready?
Yeah, Phil, I'm gonna let you take this AI one.
I rapid fire. Can do them quick. Challenges, success, experience with AI, seeking and creative process. Generative AI, get it the hell out of here. I hate it, but also it doesn't really come up for me that much. Editing AI, like remove the drums from this vocal mic, love it. Get familiar with your tools, bring those all in. They're all super helpful. Yeah, but I haven't found it at all being an actual issue like, oh, why didn't I get that job? Oh, it went to an AI person, an AI agent, as they are called. Do you find AI, I mean, AI is a help as far as I'm concerned at this stage. in 20 years, we'll all be like laughing that we thought.
I'll take this next question here in terms of what's standard.
Mm.
So there's two things. You're talking about splits. Splits is usually a term that's used for songwriting. So make sure you have an understanding of if you're writing a track versus if you're producing. If you're producing, you're usually speaking in terms of points. Standard practice as a producer is getting 4 points. If you are singularly producing the record and you are exclusively the producer, there's usually 4 points allocated for a producer and 1 point for a mixer. So if you're doing both, then in theory, you should be getting 5 points. If you're songwriting, you're working from 100. So there's a little bit more to go around there. So maybe you've just written a small part there, then, I usually defer to the artist there of how do you want to set up splits, and then you can look at it to determine like, oh, if this seems fair, if you're cut in appropriately. Yeah, that's kind of the standard practice there.
Love it.
I think Phil answered Maya's questions already, deciding rates if you have minimal to no experience. Talk to your peers, talk to your community, have an understanding of what other people are billing, and make sure you have an understanding too if you're coming in as an assistant or an engineer. Those are different roles, so you should be billing differently if you're doing one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys rolled us through and it is precisely 4 o'clock. So I want to thank you both for your time and for your rapid fire there at the end. I love it. Thank you all for joining us today. I see additional questions coming in through the chat. I unfortunately have to let Phil and Lysee go to their regular jobs.
These questions seem really good specifically for Phil, and I bet you he'll get into them on his school of song
I was
chat.
just about to say,
Yeah.
if you want to talk more about, I mean, in the School of Song, I'll give a quick School of Song. You should take the School of Song class. The class that's about to happen, if anyone, maybe some people here have taken one of them before, but if you have, I do two classes there, one, and I run them like every year or two. But so I have one coming up. It will not happen again for a long time. The one coming up is my mixing class, and we will get into like the weeds on mixing. It is specifically structured for beginner all the way to advanced. Somehow we managed to figure out how to make a mixing class that covers everybody. So if you have any interest in becoming or are already a mixer, you should take this class. It's super awesome. I talk for like 12 hours straight. I answer.
Not straight, Phil.
No, we break it up into segments, but
A
it's
lot.
you can do it asynchronous or you can do it like attended. There's like scheduled times. And I will answer every single question. There's an incredible Discord, which is like really ripping and really fun and like super good peer-to-peer learning happening in the Discord. So schoolofsong.org. It's going to be an incredible class. We're going to announce it on Monday and it will be running live in November. But again, you can take it once you sign up, you can like actually take it anytime. All the assets are sent every day. So you can be on your own schedule, especially if you're like in far-flung places on Earth. It's taught on my time because I'm in a place.
You are situated in both a time
I am
and a place.
situated in time and space, yes.
Amazing. Well, that's great. Perfect for anyone who wants to get into the weeds with Phil on all of his amazing actual craft pieces of the conversation. Thank you all for joining us as we talked about the business side and tried to demystify some of those great nitty-gritty money questions. Thank you to Lysee and Phil so much for your time today. If you enjoyed this conversation, come back for more. We've got our next Fix the Mix career workshop happening on October 17th. Info is on our website. We'll be diving into more on the sync licensing side and all sorts of music supervision kinds of pieces and questions there with Asha Dillian of the Wilders. So come back and join us for more. And otherwise, enjoy your Friday, folks. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Sky. Thank you,
Bye.
Lysee. Thanks everyone for
Bye.
listening.
Thank you.